Okay guys, the booklet that you should be looking at today is Social Class and Youth Culture. It looks like that, and the useful thing about this is it's a very quick video and a very quick topic to get through before hopefully we return back to college. We can do a little bit of revision and try and assess where we are at this particular point, but I thought we can get, I usually do this right at the end because it's quite a basic, quick one, but I thought, well, we can just put it in at this particular point, and hopefully there's not too much content within this that you've got to get your head around. Two pictures on the board, what are the difference between them? Now, obviously, if you said one's coloured, one's in black and white, well done, but I'm looking for a little bit more than that. Please note here how this fella and this fella are using their two fingers in one particular way, and this guy is using his two fingers in another way. What we have here are four different subcultures on the board. These two are different and those two are different. We've got goths and we've got hippies, and here we've got skinheads and we've got punks. Now, you should be able to say, just from what we've done for Marxism, is these are studied by Marxist groups. And our Marxists will always be focusing on social class, and they'll always be looking at one particular class, the working class. So these are working class groups, whereas on this side, we will be having some middle class ones. Now, you can tell just the fact that the police are there and their behaviour that there is going to be a difference between these groups, which is why today we're going to be focusing on social class and youth culture. Now, if you take a look at the top of page number 1, it says some sociologists have argued youth culture was classless, with people mixing from different classes in, and it uses the example here of clubs. Now, which social theory is going to say that class is irrelevant? And hopefully your answer to that is postmodernism, because very famously Bennett and Hetherington say class, age, gender and ethnicity are no longer relevant in youth culture's formations. Now, it also says there, mixing in the same clubs, which looks like it's a reference to the ravers who went clubbing, and in which case Sarah Thornton studies those. Now, if I was you watching this video, that would mean that the top part of my page has now got a load of notes on here reminding you about postmodernism. So you can either watch it and do nothing, or you can make notes as you go. It's very important that these booklets aren't just filled in, but the students who are looking for A's fill in the extra bits to underline the key parts or remind themselves, and that's something that I would encourage you to do. So here's just a brief introduction from Murdoch and McCrone. They're going to find that in the 1970s, 1975, working class and middle class are going to be attracted and follow differences in terms of the subcultures that they're going to be involved in. For the working class, it's an attraction to reggae and punk, and to the middle class, it's to counterculture movements such as peace groups. We're going to be talking about those, but you'll be able to see that there's a difference between a peace group and a punk. Their behaviour is going to be very different. Okay, so pop that down and just make sure you've got that topic filled out. So, what we're going to see here is why we don't look at a lot of middle class youths. Well, generally, what tends to happen is sociologists like to look at maybe the nitty-gritty and the resistance and the conflict going on in society, and we don't tend to see many middle class youths behaving in a way that isn't conformist, that isn't going along with the norms and values. So they don't make it into a lot of research. Yeah, absolutely, there will be middle class youths who do participate in subcultures, and we're going to be looking at those today, but they are different types of subcultures. As we said, a middle class form of protest might be a counterculture hippie peace movement. It might be the peace and love. It might be rebelling in potentially in use of drugs and things like that, but it might be a rebellion simply in their view of society and their view of what is good and what is bad in society. Maybe capitalism, for example, would be a good one. You might get a middle class youth going, I'm not going to buy any of these fancy clothes, or I'm not going to buy the trendiest trainers, I'm not bothered about that anymore. Whereas what you tend to get in working class groups, their form of protest is resistance and violence, okay? Is exaggerated masculinity, is machoing yourself up, is adhering to all those, what Connell would say is hegemonic masculine traits of being tough and macho and not showing emotion and being decisive, and really exaggerating that to get to violence and resistance. So So make sure that you've got page number 1 filled in, and hopefully, you can picture yourself, well, that would make perfect sense why sociologists tend to look a little bit more at our working class groups than our middle class ones. Now, hippies is the first one that we're going to look at, and there's lots of different ones that we're going to look at briefly. The information is here in your book, so I'm not going to spend loads and loads of time talking about these, where you've got the information at hand, and because I'm going to send out the PowerPoint, on that PowerPoint will be, if you just click these, will be the links to the videos that are online that you can watch about the hippies, and there's quite a good couple of funny ones on here for our hippies. So, hippie culture develops in the USA. We know, as we've studied the hippies before, and at least one person in your group will have done a presentation on the hippies, they were responding to the war in Vietnam. They were quite anti-capitalism, they didn't like capitalism, and they were all about peace, love, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. This is what we know about our hippies. And that is an example of a kind of counterculture. They're saying no to capitalism, they're disliking capitalism. So they're going to maybe dress slightly differently, they're going to look slightly differently, they won't adhere to the norms of capitalist society, of consumerism, of buying things, of wearing the trendiest trainers, etc., etc. Now, when it comes to our hippies, they are largely going to be from, and we've got a couple of missing words here, so the hippies in the UK came from largely middle class families that were popular for university students. They rejected the consumer culture of society and the conservative attitudes of their parents. Now, what they really, really liked were things like drugs and music, and you can see that when Mike Brake, because he looks at the hippies as well, Mike Brake looks at the hippies, he finds that there's a few contradictions within the hippies. So, for example, they hate consumerism and technology, but all had massive speaker systems to play their rock and roll music that they liked. They didn't like materialism, so they didn't like, they were like, oh, money's disgusting, like, we don't want to, we shouldn't be using money, like, let's get rid of capitalism. But they were really happy to take benefits from the government to make sure that they could keep eating and keep buying whatever it is they wanted to buy. And one of the things that they wanted to buy was LSD, which is a drug that's created and synthesized in a lab. But of course the hippies, they didn't like things that were impure, they didn't like impure foods. So they would hate McDonald's because that was all, not created in a lab, but I suppose as good as. But LSD was fine. They could take as much LSD as you want. Certain laboratories are okay. So this is an example of our hippies, right? They're associated with peace, love, middle class. It's a rebellion against the norms of society, but not in a way that is like conflict driven, not in a way that is violent, just in a way that is kind of moving away from the norms. So hippies are a good example of a traditionally middle class group. Now it says here, your turn, and it is your turn now, because I just talked to you about the hippies. And what you have on page 3, and I'll get your version here, on page number 3, you've got a breakdown here of the Goths, studied by Paul Hodgkinson, and we've mentioned Hodgkinson before. Goths are a brilliant youth subculture because they kind of criticise everything. They're going to be very critical of, because they're a middle class group, they're going to be really critical of your Marxists because all Marxist subcultures appear to be quite violent and working class, and the Goths are like kind and peaceful and down and depressed, but very middle class. But the Goths are a very good example, according to Hodgkinson, of a subculture that still exists today. He very famously says, and you'll see in this breakdown, that when you goth for life, which kind of destroys this idea that subcultures are short-lived, and that, like our Marxists would think, once incorporation takes place, the subculture goes. Well, that hasn't happened with the Goths. And it was very critical of postmodernism, because our postmodernists go, well, hold on, there's not even any subcultures anymore. You're all just joining Neotribes, depending on whichever day of the week it is. Well, not for Goths still today. So getting to know the Goths and getting your head around this is really, really important. So you've got Goths on page 3. On page 4, you've got the Teddy Boys, studied by Jefferson. Teddy Boys, as we know, the first real consumer subculture. certainly with their clothing, but the teddy boys are a bit of a weird one because the teddy boys are influenced by the middle class, but they are not a middle class group. So you've had the hippies who were middle class, you've had the goths who were middle class, you've got the teddies who might look middle class, but they're absolutely not. And then finally, you go back to our traditional ones of the working class and the punks. So that's on page 5. So what I would like you to do is go through those 3 different subcultures. One is working class, one is middle class, and one used a middle class style, and get to know them. You would normally be sharing it with a person in your group, but you've not got anybody in your group, so you've got to get to know all 3, okay? So have a read through those now and come back and we'll move on and we'll be looking at page number 7, okay? So pause it now, do you read it? Okay, on page number 7, what you've got is your page should hopefully look like this. Okay, and page number 7 is a little bit of revision because as soon as you saw class, I'm hoping what you thought to yourself is, oh well, we'll be covering and looking at Marxism in this. And of course you will, because when it comes to social class, that's all that Marxism thinks is important. Now, I'm going to ask you to do this and send it to me. So this is the first thing that you're going to be doing in today's lesson. Working class youth were more likely to be part of a skinhead subculture. Who was the person who studied the skinheads? Well, it's Clark, so that'll give you a hint. So the Clark saw skinheads as a way of defending working class values. So what I want you to do is there are traditionally 3 working class values. I want you to think about the 2 working class values that were exaggerated in Clark's study, and there's space for you to fill them in there. And underneath, what you'll see is 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes which need the key points from each of those key writers. So it's a way of you revising Hall and Jefferson, Clark, Brake, and the idea of incorporation. So what you are going to do is I want you to fill out page number 6 for me. There shouldn't need to be loads of stuff, but go into a reasonable level of detail. Like this isn't just 3 words. Like when you do might break magical solution, I don't just want 3 bullet points. It needs to be a little bit more than that. What you're going to be writing about in the exam if might break comes up. You can't just go 3 points are this, this, and this. Well, what does he mean? Take it a little bit further. Why does he use the term magical solution? Perhaps is something else to add in there. So the level of note taking, I think, don't just go, oh, I'll get through this in 30 seconds. Think about it. Look back in your Marxism booklet, but don't look back straight away. This isn't a copying exercise. This is a look at what you know, put it down in there, then take the booklet out and then double check. That way you're going to get something out of it because you're going to show yourself, right, well, I do know that already. And if you're looking at these and you don't know any of them, that's a real worrying sign. And then maybe something ticks in your head that goes, actually, maybe you need to do a bit more revision or need to do a little bit more work. So, page number 6, I am not going to go over these with you on this particular video. I want you to send the work to me, okay? That's the first thing that I want you to do. So pause it now, get page number 6 done, send it to me, I will check it, let you know that everything is hunky-dory, hopefully, before we move on to page number 7. But it doesn't have a page number. Okay, go. Okay, on page number 7, well, you won't be seeing that, but what you will be seeing is an outline of Walter B. Miller and his notion of something called focal concerns. And you should have a lovely little breakdown here of 6 of what he would call the focal concerns. Now, normally what I would do is have you read through the focal concerns, but I'm going to explain the focal concerns for you. And what Walter B. Miller says, he's not a Marxist, okay? He's going to say that working class subcultures, so groups of working class lads, are going to get in trouble because they've got a different set of norms and values. Okay, so he's not a Marxist. We've just looked at the Marxists because they're saying it's all about resistance to capitalism, exaggerating your masculinity because of the problems with capitalism. Walter Miller's just going to say working class lads are going to get in trouble because of a different set of norms and values. So what are these norms and values? Now, here is a traditional, and we've got to play the stereotype game, working class lads night out. So what will happen is they'll all go around each other's house for pre-drinks or drugs. So you go around in a group of 6 or 7 of you drinking loads, trying to get wasted, trying to take as many drugs as you can, and then what you're going to do, well, you're going to go out into town. So you're going to go to Manchester town centre. You're either going to get there 2 ways, you're going to jump on the tram, right, but you literally are going to jump on the tram because you're not going to pay for a ticket, or you're going to try and order a cab, and you call the cab and you're like, right, how much is it to town? And they say, oh, it'll be about 20 quid. And you go, all right then. And then they all pile into the cab. When they turn up at town, the cab driver says that's 20 quid, and they're going to say, oh, I've only got 15 quid, mate. So you'll have to have 15 quid. And then they'll kick off a little bit. Then they'll walk up to the club. They're all under 18, but they've got a fake ID. So they get in, through they go to the bouncers, up to the bar they go, and they haven't got enough money to pay for the drinks, so they start swiping the drinks off people. So you just minesweep a few drinks, steal a few drinks, drink those. If anybody knocks you when you're in the club, spill a little bit of drink on you, they're going to have to buy you a new drink, or there's going to be a bit of fighting, a bit of fisticuffs before the bouncer drags you out, and home you go again. Now that is a traditional working class night out, and within that, what we see are Walter Miller's ideas of focal concerns. These different set of norms and values that lead working class subcultures to deviant behaviour and run-ins with the law. Now, these focal concerns, as Miller said, make it inevitable that they are going to be committing crimes on a night out. And here they are. So, I'm going to give you the focal concerns, and you can fill them in the necessary box, and an example of them should correspond underneath as well. So the first one is excitement. This is them searching for thrills. So it's booze, it's drugs, it's going out there looking for sex. That's what they want from a night out. They want excitement. This can be obtained when we're out and about uptown. The next one is smartness. Remember, pause these as we're going through so you've got time to write them down. Smartness. This is where they outfox or can outwit the person. And you saw a couple of examples of it on my pretend night out. Like, they've got a fake ID so they can get in, and they minesweep the drinks so they don't have to pay for anything. You know, they got away with getting to town without paying for the cab properly, or jumping on the Met without a ticket. Smartness. That's what they have to exhibit. They want to con people out of it. Trouble. The working class accept that their lives will involve violence, and they will not run away from a fight. If somebody knocks them in a club, spills their drink, trouble is going to ensue. Okay? And the reason that trouble ensues is because, just like this gentleman, they've got to appear tough and masculine. Okay? They've got a reputation to uphold, and they need to do it, and they can't be weak. They can't be, as it says, they can't be timid, they can't be passive. They've got to be engaged in this because they know they've got to be tough, and therefore when you've got to be tough, trouble will follow you. Autonomy. Nobody's going to push them around. So the bouncers, when they tell them they've had too much to drink, or if the bar won't serve them anymore, they'll kick up because nobody's going to be saying to them what they can or what they can't do. So autonomy, the right not to be pushed around, is very important. And here's the last one, and probably the saddest or the most crucial. There is nothing that can be done about their lives. It is fate. They are working class lads. This is their behaviour. There is nothing that can be done about it. These are the 6 focal concerns, according to Walter B. Miller, that mean that working class lads on a night out, they're going to end up in a delinquent, deviant, potentially criminal situation. Pause it now, go back to any of the ones that you didn't get, make sure that you fill them out. Obviously you don't need to write everything out in full, but make sure you've got enough notes to go off. In the exam, Would you be discussing all 6 of these? Well, you probably wouldn't have time unless you've got nothing else to write about. So pick 2 or 3 of them that you'll really remember well and that you can really expand upon in a great amount of detail. That would be my advice. Okay. So, what are our postmodernists going to say? We've already discussed this, the top 2 at the start of the lesson. If you turn on to, and I don't think it's got a page number, but it is page 8, but it looks like that, doesn't have a number, this is where we're up to now. Do class differences still exist? So here's a bit of a revision for postmodernism, because you know that our postmodernists are going to say something else that is very different to what the other social theories are going to say. So what do they say about Cage? Well, remember, class, age, gender and ethnicity from a postmodern perspective are irrelevant. So Bennett and Hetherington would say Cage is irrelevant. Bang. Does not matter anymore. Why does class, age and gender, really typical identities that were very important in the past, why does that not matter anymore? What has happened to society that means that they don't matter? Well, hopefully that, you can see, means that society, the traditional society, is breaking apart. And the word that they would use to describe that is fragmented. So our traditional idea about class has broken up. You know, if you were doing this lesson 100 years ago, you're all going to be the same class. You're either all going to be middle class or you're all going to be working class, okay? And you'd all look the same dependent on which class you were from. And you'd all talk the same dependent on which class you were from. And you'd all wear the same stuff. Now, I can't see the class when I look at you, or according to postmodernists. You can't tell whether somebody is the son or daughter of 2 doctors on, £250,000 a year, net income, or whether you are on 2 parents who are on benefits, for example. Because the clothes are the thing that matters, and you can still have quite trendy clothes and a trendy phone and up-to-date technology, and that will be okay. So we see society and we see it fragmenting. Everything about society is fragmented according to a postmodernist. We're focusing on class here because that's what the lesson's about. But if you think about gender, 120 years ago, people would just say, well, there's man or woman. Whereas now the postmodern idea is that that's not the case. When you look at ethnicity, we'd have said, oh, well, traditionally 100 years ago, everybody in the classroom is white. Everybody in the classroom is Christian. Everybody in the classroom just speaks English. But that's not the case anymore. Fragmented. Those traditional lines of identity have broken up and have divided. Because Cage doesn't matter and society is fragmented, we don't have subcultures anymore. We have the Neotribe, and remember, the Neotribe is the loose grouping of people, but what it is based on is consumerism. So the most important thing in the Neotribe is consumerism. Remember, consumerism shapes your identity. So if you like Marvel and stuff like that, I don't know anything about that really, but let's say you like Marvel, you can go to one of these Comic Cons dressed up as Batman or something, maybe he's not even a Marvel character, I don't know. You can go dressed up as that, and that is your identity for the day. But you don't dress like Batman every day. The next night you might be going to a rave because you also enjoy ecstasy and rave music, and therefore you'll be a consumer of that the next day. And everywhere you go, you're surrounded by people whose ethnicity, whose gender, whose class you don't know, and it doesn't matter because you're not in a subculture, you're in a Neotribe. Remember, Bennett's the guy who develops this idea of Neotribe from Maffesoli's concept of tribalization. And an example of a Neotribe would obviously be ravers, which was studied by Sarah Thornton at the Manchester Institute of Popular Culture. So, how is a Neotribe different to a subculture? I'm hoping that that you can figure out just from what we've talked about. The fact that it's a loose grouping of people. So some sociologists argue that class differences no longer exist to any extent between youth. Postmodernists believe that class boundaries have blurred over the years. This is called, missing term here, we've seen gender convergence, but we've also, according to our postmodernists, seen class convergence as well, where the boundaries of the class lines are blurred over. We've obviously got Neotribes here. Our key writer for Neotribes he put on the board was Bennett. The theory behind it is postmodernism, obviously. And then how is a Neotribe different from a subculture? Well, hopefully from what we've explained, you can fill out a paragraph there talking about why Neotribes and subcultures are so different. Your bit underneath, urban dance music. So dance music, humble beginnings in New York and Chicago. DJs had to make records last longer due to dance record shortage caused by racially motivated anti-disco rally 1979. Disco sucks was what they used to say then, and it was like a racial attack on the disco scene, which was a predominantly black scene. Dance music is an excellent example of globalization, as your missing word, as music is played in clubs and shops and advertisements across the world. So remember, globalization has a big impact on consumerism. You know, you can choose to listen to music from different cultures now, and music from different cultures will impact your own musical tastes. And that is globalization, basically the world getting smaller and more interconnected. And you can see globalization and its impact in the supermarket of style. Key writer for that is Ted Polymus. So I'm hoping you can see that the postmodern section about class is just postmodernism and youth culture. It's the Bennetts, the Thorntons, the Polymus, the consumerism, globalization, neotribes, fragmentation, the argument that cage is irrelevant. Everything that you did in that section, you can relate it to class. The Marxism bit that we did today, resistance to capitalism, it's exactly what we did in the Marxism theory section. So this is just kind of revision of these two social theories. It makes it quite straightforward, which is why I said to you at the start, if you know your functionalism, your Marxism, your postmodernism, and your feminism, all of their theories of youth culture, like the back of your hand, it makes everything else so straightforward. Because hopefully, those of you who've been watching this and who've gone through this go, yeah, I knew that already, Dan. Like, that's just revision for me. Which is exactly what we want. So, here is the final thing that I want you to do. So, you've obviously already sent me the page on your Marxism revision. You've filled in the booklet as we've gone. And then now, it's the end of the booklet, and you are at the point where we can look at a question. Now, obviously, the booklet does go on to page, yours will be a different page to mine, won't it? Does go on to page number 12 and page 13, which you can fill in if you want, but it's not essential. That's kind of revision. So I'm getting people sending me through that completed. That's great. That will really help you, but it's not essential that you do it. So don't worry about those pages. Just worry about page 9, page 10, and page 11 for me. Okay? Because you're going to be doing, you're going to be finishing the lesson by looking at this question. Now the good news is, this is great news for you, you don't have to do this question. I'm not going to set you a 15 marker on this topic. What we are going to do is we are going to plan it, and I want you to send me the plan, and then I want you to write a paragraph from this 15 marker to send to me. So you are going to be completing the plan on page 10, and on page 11 you're going to be writing it out. But I'm not just going to let you go off and do it by yourself. We are going to consider what would go in this question. Explain the relationship between class and membership of youth cultures. It's 15 marks. Just before you actually move on to page 10, as per usual, I've attached the mark scheme on page 9. And what you'll see is there is a column for AO1, knowledge, and a column for AO2, application of your knowledge to the question. There is no AO3 in a 15 marker. Do not evaluate in your 15 marker. If you do, it'll be clear that you've not looked at this or listened to me. there's quite a few people who scored very, very poorly on their 35 marker because they didn't evaluate at all. You've got to get to grips with the fact that anything that's 30 marks or above, you need to evaluate. Anything that's below that in sociology, you don't have to evaluate. So start to kind of compartmentalise, right, where am I, what's the mark scheme that I've got to use for this? So the question is this: explain the relationship between class and membership of youth cultures. Now, as you will see, on the essay plan, they will be looking for at least 3 paragraphs of explanation here, no evaluation. Each one should focus on a different key writer. Now, I say, and I always say this, if you've got time in the exam, don't sit there and not write anything. If you find that you've finished 10 minutes early, you can go and put in a 4th paragraph, or a 5th paragraph even, right? Because even though it won't earn you many marks, if you do 5 paragraphs in this, you might have already got 14, it might get you 1 extra. Or going back and adding something else into a 35 marker that you think's done, it might not get you 10 extra marks, but it might get you 1 or 2. And at the end of the day, your total is going to be out of 300, and if you're 1 or 2 marks off A's and B's, which happens every year, you're going to kick yourself that you didn't go back and fight for the extra marks. So, here are potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different paragraphs that you could write about when you're answering this question. Explain the relationship between class and membership of youth culture. Now, what I would be doing here is I would always start the paragraph with your point. So answer the question. Almost as though like your first sentence sets up what you're going to say for the remainder of that paragraph. And it should flow from that. So we'll take working class subcultures by the CCCS. So if you wanted to do that for paragraph 1, we know the CCCS are our Marxists. And what they would say is the reason that working class join subcultures is to resist capitalism and perhaps exaggerate their masculinity. So the reason, and here's your focus, it would be working class, is because of resistance to capitalism. And notice, I'm kind of giving an explanation. I've kind of got my because reason. Well, the reason that there's a relationship between class and membership of youth culture is because of this, or it's due to this, or the relationship is this because of this. I'm giving myself a reason. Now, in every paragraph, I'm saying at least you need 1 key writer. Okay? Now, in your Marxism paragraph, there might be a couple more. Okay? You might start with Mike Brake, because he explains what's going on in the situation in the world at the particular time, and then I would always use Clark as my example. Now, that's obviously the absolute bare bones of what it would be, but that is how in my head I set up these paragraphs. I'd go, the reason working class join subcultures is because they would exist to resist against capitalism. Mike Brake would suggest that capitalism causes 3 problems in society. This means We can see that in Clark's skinheads, Clark's skinheads supports this idea because he would argue that they form due to the need to exaggerate their masculinity because their traditional identity has been threatened by capitalism and migration. He said that their behaviours would be blah, 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 blah. And you've got your paragraph. It stems from this point. You've got a key writer to back it up. You've supported him with somebody else. Bang. There's 2 key writers in there. That's absolutely fine. Move on to the next one. Now, what I'm going to ask here is for you guys to just kind of give me the kind of because. That's what I'm looking for. So I would do Miller. So what's the reason that, or what's the relationship between class and membership of youth culture for Miller? And then hopefully you go on to talk about his idea, his concept, which is focal concerns. But I still want the because, and that should be key in your plan. So like, what is the because? That's the bit that I'm looking for, as well as the stuff to put in there. Number 3, I would always go to, I'd go to Hodgkinson maybe. Or I'd go for Firth and do a middle class group. But what's there because? And then finally, paragraph 4. Here is here's the key, right? For paragraph 4, forget Hall and Jefferson. You can do, Jefferson. You can do Jefferson if you want, and not Hodgkinson. But I want you to do this one. Pick whatever you want for 3. But paragraph 4, postmodernism. Now, what is the relationship between class and membership of youth culture for postmodernism? It's not a trick question. But here's the beauty of postmodernism for that 4th paragraph. The beauty of having postmodernism here is, think about it. Whether this question says explain the relationship between class or ethnicity or gender, the postmodern paragraph is exactly the same. It's like a get out of jail cheap paragraph. So that if you've done 3 and you've got 5 minutes left, what's postmodernism going to say about it and why? Such an easy paragraph to put in. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to do the plan for me. Tell me what the because is going to be. Give me the key writers and the key concepts. Bit of revision there to put in. So what are you going to say in there? And obviously I'm going to be checking to make sure you've got a because reason. Send me that. Once I've given you the A-OK, I want you to write out an example paragraph. You're not allowed to do Marxism because I've kind of taught you through it already. So I want an example paragraph. So you can pick 2, 3 or 4 and I want you to send me a picture of that. Okay? So that, ladies and gents, is it. So the 2 things that I want sent to me today, and you should have already done this, is the first one is a quick bit of revision on page 6, and the second one is a copy of your plan and a copy of the paragraph that you have attempted to write yourself following that. Remember, these paragraphs, you're writing them in the style of a paragraph. And how you do that is by starting off with a point, answer the question, give me the reason that there is a relationship, give me the because, and then go on to explain that using the key concepts and what the key writers are going to be saying. It doesn't have to just be one writer per paragraph. For Marxism, you've got 2. For postmodernism, you might have 2 or you might have 3. Okay? So don't feel like you're limited yourself, but a paragraph shouldn't be any longer than that 1 page, no matter how big your writing is. Okay? Thanks, guys.